Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin, episode 29, which is a listener Q&A episode.
Yes.
And we're hoping that actually this will be the last intro that you will hear for this podcast without music.
Yeah.
Prefacing
cool.
it. We're in the midst of trying to get a song selected for our intro song. If you have any suggestions, please send them our way. I've talked to a few people whose opinions I value, and the unanimous choice seems to be, I don't know if you can really quantify this as a specific genre, but they all say that they want something uplifting. So something that kind of fits the theme of chasing your dreams and energizing people, motivating people. Nothing genre specific, but just something uplifting.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
You and I have some ideas. We've been browsing through some, I don't know what the proper term is, but music that we're legally able to use without copyright infringement or any of that. So a couple things that we're going to try to do there. And hopefully that's the last episode that you guys have no intro for.
That'd be cool.
No music intro for, I should say.
That'll be fun.
So yeah, dude, before we get into the Q&As, how are you? How are things? Let's give a brief update on the life of Justin and the life of myself real quick.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. Being back in the gym.
Yep.
Getting to crush workouts again.
Yep.
Being sore. I heard when I first started lifting last year, I was sore all the time, and my dad actually said, sore is the new sexy. So sore is the new sexy's back in town, and it feels good.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, for me, I like seeing, obviously, like everybody in the gym, but I like seeing the progressiveness of everything, like how my training's upregulating now. I'm eating more food, I'm training heavier, and every week you make such big gains.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that I'm gaining anything, it's just more or less getting back to where I was previously, so it's not like I'm in like uncharted territory here as far as like muscle size or strength goes, but it is nice to be able to add like 10, 15, 20, even 30 pounds to like some of my compound lifts every week. It feels good.
Absolutely.
So yeah, dude, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I don't really have much to say other than that. I mean, no news is good news, right? In fitness, sometimes like that's like with Austin, my coach, every time we do updates, I look forward to him saying, no changes, boring update today.
Yeah.
Proceed as is, because number one, it means that everything's working, which is good, and then the second thing is that if we're increasing food, that's never fun. So usually that's like one of two things that I get: either yes, you're fine, or we're going to add more food. Those are like the only two things it seems like we ever do, at least in the off season, but that's to be expected. So like I said, no news is good news for us.
Absolutely.
We're staying the course. All right, so we have some listener questions that we're going to get to. Some of which are scientific questions, I guess, for lack of a better term. Not really sure what I'd use there. Some are opinion questions, which your opinion and my opinion may be different. So we'll kind of get into those. And I have to apologize, too. I had a couple questions. One in particular, somebody asked me, and I told them I would answer it on our show. And then I completely forgot who asked me the question and what the question was, because I promised them that I would write it down. And lo and behold, I did not write it down. Right. So go figure, that was what happened. So first question that I have, and this is taken from, we had a couple different ways to ask questions like normal. Right. We actually, Nick, our new graphic design / media expert.
Guru.
Yeah. Our media guru, as I like to say, was able to give us some insights on how to do graphics, and he actually did a graphic for us that was a Q&A graphic. So we posted that, both of us. The first question that I have actually comes from my story, how I like to put them on my story. And I think this one was geared at me specifically, but there's kind of some dialogue that I want to go back and forth with you on.
Absolutely.
It. Jerome asks, how did you start doing yoga and what kind did you do? So first, I think for me, it's important to preface this question or at least my answer to this question by saying I am not a yoga expert by any means. So I hope that I'm using some of like the terms the correct way and in the correct context, because I certainly don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to yoga. I like to think like I do, but I really don't. And then again, there's going to be some dialogue between you and me speaking to yoga. I first got into yoga a couple years ago, and it was kind of, I don't want to say by mistake, but I didn't get into yoga in the sense that I wanted to try yoga specifically. I got into yoga because I wanted to try different training methodologies. and I wanted to immerse myself in things that were different. So it was like, remember you and I talked about last week how the things you aren't doing are the things you should be doing in
Right.
that instance.
Yeah.
So I went through this phase a couple years ago where I wanted to try to do everything. Bodybuilding was still my main goal, in strength sports, of course. But I wanted to branch out and do more. So I had this day with a former player of mine named Dalton, where we would go to our football complex, and every Wednesday was like an athletic work day. And we would do box jumps, and we would do cleans, we would do deadlifts, and not that the deadlifts are athletic specific, but we would do them as far as rep progression goes, and we would do speed reps and band work, supersetted with box jumps, and we would do sprints, a lot of work out on the track. So I did things to try to like kind of hone in on my athleticism a little bit, and I saw how it helped me in other avenues too. Like it helped me in the gym with my strength sports, it helped my physique. So I got into this like period of time for about a year or two where I tried to do everything I could get my hands on, and naturally yoga was one of those things. So I tried to do yoga, and the first yoga that I started with, again, this is where the terminology is kind of finicky here in my own head. I think that it was called yin yoga. Essentially what it is it's the way I would explain it would be beginner's yoga.
Right.
So it's very slow paced. You hold poses for a very long time. Almost like just like think about doing a lunge and holding it like in an isometric position where you just have to hold it there.
Right.
And you would hold all these stretches, and I was terrible at first. But I did it, like I said, because I kind of wanted something that would give me a little bit of well-roundedness. So I was trying to get my hands in everything. The yoga thing was just, it was a training method, I guess that you could say, that kind of resonated with me though. Yeah. It stuck. Like, we're like, oh, I like this, so I'm going to continue to do this. And it made me a better athlete. It helped with my technique on other lifts because my mobility was so good. I saw improvements every week, so it was fun. It was definitely brutal, and I was definitely never to the point where it was enjoyable in the sense that it was relaxing. Because everybody says that about yoga.
I've never experienced relaxation from yoga.
No, absolutely not. Furthest thing from, because I was so tired, and it was funny because I was, when you looked at me at the time, like I looked like I was in phenomenal shape, and I would go with like, these middle-aged men and women who did not look like they were in the same shape I was, but at the end of it, they were all almost falling asleep, and I was out of breath, like panting and, breathing very heavily and covered in sweat, and it was miserable, but a fun miserable, because like we talked about last week, the whole challenge zone thing.
Yeah, I think we're people that like the misery in workouts like we do are different.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
But yeah, yoga to me is, I've done some yoga with my wife. One of those things where, honey, will you do this with me? Yes, I will.
The reluctant yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I have to say, it has helped a lot. I don't know the words and the terms at all. Like, you know a lot more yin and zins and yangs than I know, because I know like 3 poses, the downward dog, and I think in praying something or other, I can't even remember what they're called, but they work so well just for like my orthopedic issues.
Yeah. Oh,
I love yoga.
Yeah.
I want to learn more about
it. And so that's kind of the next transition that I was going to say is I haven't done it in a while, and I actually wanted to go to a specific studio, but their hours were not able to align with my schedule because, and to be fair, there's not really much that is able to align to my schedule because it's so hectic. But I kind of set it aside for a couple years, then put it on the back burner, which was a shame because it was something that I really liked doing and I loved. I think that if I use the term yoga, it would be a misnomer because it's not actual yoga, but I still do some semblance of it in my yard. Like I'll go out like as the sun is rising some days, or in the middle of the day when it's really hot out, preferably anytime I can get out in the sun, and I'll put out my yoga mat and I'll basically do not yoga specific posing, but static stretching, just sitting and breathing, going through my breathing progressions and stuff in the sun, in the grass, and it just feels so good to me. The one thing that I really want to get into is hot yoga.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
It's just yoga, my understanding, again, non-professional information coming here. I believe it's just a yoga that's done in a like a steam room, or not necessarily a steam room, but a room that's very, very hot.
Yeah.
Like they turn it up so it's almost sauna-ish, and then you go through your yoga practice, which you and I would both love because we love sweating, love being hot. And I was actually, it's funny that this question came across because I was actually looking it up the other day. I was Googling yoga studios just last week that are in the nearby area, thinking about, I want to get back into this. Where are some studios that give, number one, offer hot yoga, and number two, of course, offer it in a time frame that I could meet with my schedule. So
I'd be down to try it. I'm not real good with the poses, like when they bark out the pose, what to do. You have to show me.
And there was a few that I caught up with, like, I could name probably about half dozen off the top of my head that I know. But I, for sure, the year that I did it, and it was probably less than a calendar year that I was taking it regularly, at least once a week. I was definitely doing a lot more seeing and watching than listening, because they would say a pose. I wouldn't know the pose, but I would just do what the pose looked like and say, okay, I think this is right. And our instructor at the time was really good. She would come around and manipulate you. So as you were in a position, she would model it first, and then fix it. Like if your hips were too high, and she would put me into positions that I could barely stand or barely breathe in. But
it's yoga to me. I think you've used yoga more recently than you give yourself credit to, because I like we train together. So your stretching regimen is all forms of yoga.
Yeah, I guess in a sense you're right.
I am relaxed after our stretching. It's weird because I'm usually out of breath, and
heart rate's up and you're sweaty, but
I feel relaxed and definitely ready for the workout. And I think that's how I want to utilize yoga, is to get myself ready for the activity, rather that be just relaxing to be better at life or whatever. But I do want to try it.
Yeah, I like the physical benefits, and I'm going to take that one step further and say that not only can you use some of the practices you learn in yoga to get you primed for a workout acutely, like I'm going to do it right now to get ready for this next workout here in 10 minutes, but you can also use it to, I think, taper down the amount of time you need to spend warming up.
Right.
Because if I have a ton of like hip mobility issues and I work through them in yoga, now I can spend less time warming up my hips because they are so fluid from doing this practice. So instead of spending 15 minutes of foam rolling and using my massage gun and going through my mobility work, I can do that for 5 minutes. I cut it,
I think that's kind of like, I go back to this all the time, but like David Goggins talks about his stretching regimen. It's literally, he stretches like 3-4 hours every day, and the guy runs 200-300 miles at a time.
And I think the why is different for everybody, especially when it comes to something like stretching or something therapeutic like yoga. There's people who do it for mental benefits, some who do it for spiritual benefits, some who do it for physical benefits. I try to reap all of those rewards and use it for all those purposes when I had done it previously. But I think that there's definitely benefits to the overreaching kind of message here is that the more you can immerse yourself in, the better off you'll be, because you'll number one, be well-rounded, specifically in fitness, but you'll also find that you like things, because I would have never thought that I liked yoga, and actually I hated it after the first couple times because it was so difficult for me, and it was like, throwing someone who thinks they're a good swimmer right into the middle of the rough ocean. Suddenly they can't swim. It's like I thought like I was athletic and had good mobility and stuff, and then when I did that, it's like, well, maybe not. But I would definitely something I'm going to look forward to getting back to in the future. It was, like I said, very coincidental that he asked that question just now, because it was literally last week that I looked this up and was looking for hot yoga studios, or studios that offered it. And so, want to get back into it.
Absolutely.
All right. So next question that I have, this next question was also sent via Instagram story. Zane asks, what is the best way to gain muscle fast? Is it lifting heavier weights for less or lighter weights?
I mean, that's the question.
I get this question. Well, foremost, let me give two little talking points before I dive deep into this on what my opinion is and what I've seen. First of all, like everything in fitness, and I hate this because it's such a cop-out answer, You know what I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
It depends.
It just depends.
Like, I mean, there are so many variables and factors that go into this that it really, really depends. The other thing that I want to preface this with is, and this is kind of going to, like, I guess, negate every follow-up answer we're going to give to this, but it also doesn't matter to an extent. I've seen people that have done every type of training imaginable. I've seen people that do heavy. I've seen people that train light. I've seen people that train with moderate loads. I've seen people that train high volume, high frequency, low frequency, everything. And guess what? Every one of them made substantial progress and looked better and got stronger.
Right.
So the first thing you'll have to ask yourself is, what is my main goal? Because I think that any type of training is going to make you more muscular, probably.
Right.
It's going to ideally burn some body fat. So better body composition overall, more muscle, less fat, and it's going to make you more athletic. Now, the term athletic is pretty subjective.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's loose. I like that. It's loose. It depends on athleticism of what? Athleticism, strength training, movement ability.
Right.
There's so many things that go into it. But I will say this, as far as which is better, or let's say optimal, right?
Optimal. That, I think that would be the word to use. It's definitely optimal.
Because we try to strive for making everything optimal.
Right.
Like, we can't make everything perfect, but the next step down from perfect is optimal.
Right.
So I would say this: whenever you have it, I get this question all the time. This is the number one question I get: is what is the best workout or whatever. I'll tell you this with this question. Number one is, there are 3 ways that you can get better in regards to training, right? Everything has to be progressive.
Right.
So your body is very adaptive and will adapt to the stimulus that you get it. Excuse the motorcycle going by here.
Studio B. Yeah.
Yeah. Very loud motorcycle driving by. We're in Studio B, aka my Honda Civic, recording this, like we have been lately.
Yeah.
Hopefully someday we'll look back on this and say, hey, that was pretty cool when we weren't in this big fancy studio with headsets and microphones and a soundboard, and we were actually in your car. But regardless.
Yeah, we'll go back to that.
Yeah, well, another story for another day. So anyway, like you said, Justin, progressive overload. You have to continue to get better at something, otherwise you're not going to get better at something. I mean, I know that sounds like common sense, but so there's 3 ways that you can progress through strength training or through lifting, whether your goal is actual strength and power output, or if it is hypertrophy based, so muscle gain.
Right.
You can increase frequency, you can increase volume, or you can increase intensity. So we have to go and define those words, right?
Right.
So what does frequency mean? Frequency, obviously, is how often you do stuff. So for me, I guess right now I'm trading everything once a week. I have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday split where I do push on Monday, pull on Wednesday, and then lower body on Friday. And then we've just recently added arms, just kind of as a fun thing, on Saturdays.
Brutal.
So that's my frequency. I do once a week. Frequency is how often you do things. What's your frequency training right now?
I'm doing the same split, but I'm training 5 to 6 days a week.
Okay, so you have a little bit higher frequency.
Right, yeah. So, Monday, Wednesday. So basically Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm doing push, pull, legs. And then Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I'm doing push and pull again. Tuesday and Thursday, and then arms on Saturday.
Okay, so you're about double my frequency then. So Justin is training more frequently than I am as far as body parts go. The next way that you can progress is volume. So those people that aren't familiar with training verbiage, volume just refers to how much you're doing over the course of the workout, or over the course of the training cycle or whatever.
To me, I think people, and I kind of get hung up on the volume a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Where volume, I used to think volume meant the amount of weight I hang on the bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of times, and to me, I feel like volume kind of feels like the amount of weight moved.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you put 225 on the bar and you bench it 5 times, and I put 135 on the bar and I bench it 65 times.
Yeah. Yep.
The amount of weight moved is more.
Because obviously load will likely go down for most movements as volume increases, because you're doing more, so you're going to be able to lift less weight.
Right.
And then the last one is intensity, which is probably the number one misconstrued term there. People think when they talk about exercise terminology, they think sometimes intensity means how hard you're going. Like, oh, he's intense in the gym because he's screaming, he's very focused, which training intensity actually refers to the load specifically that you mentioned before. The training intensity is basically how close you are to your 1 rep max. So if I'm doing, if my max bench is 400 pounds and I'm doing 380, that's relatively high intensity that I'm doing that my training for. So likewise, when we said we have high volume, low intensity, if you have high intensity, you're going to have low volume because you can't train super heavy and do a ton of volume there.
Right.
So when you look at those 3 things, okay, I can gain muscle size and get stronger doing higher frequency, higher volume, or higher intensity, so higher weights.
Yeah. I mean,
so basically, I can lift more often, I can do more while I'm there, or I can lift heavier weight.
I guess the answer that I would give to that is pick one and do it right.
Yep, I agree with that.
Do it 100%. Put everything to it for a cycle. Pick the cycle you want to do it. Do it for a week. Do it for a month. Do it for 3 months. And then pick the next one. You can't change all 3 of them all the time because then you're not doing any of them. You're mixing it up too much.
And here's the caveat there. The catch specifically with training volume and training intensity and training frequency is if you want to increase your frequency and you think that that may be beneficial for you, like you said, do it. I think that's great advice. If you think you want to experiment with higher volume and maybe doing more for your workout, do it. If you want to experiment with higher intensity, so heavier loads closer to your 1 rep max, do it. However, I will say this, that inevitably you will come back to only one of those 3 because only one of those 3
is going to work the best for you.
Is I think it's sustainable long term.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you think about frequency, you can only go so frequent until you plateau. So if I want to go higher frequency, let's say I'm training every body part twice a week like you are.
Yeah.
Okay. You're already going 6 days a week. Mm-hmm. There's only 7 days in a week.
Can't go much more.
And there gets to be a point where your frequency gets so high that recovery is going to go down and it's going to be impossible.
Well, I did that.
Yeah. Exactly.
And blew up.
You have the injuries to prove it.
Right.
So there's going to be a point where frequency has to stop being your number 1 progression point, right? Same thing with volume. You can add volume, do more during your workout. Now, volume isn't necessarily measured in time in the gym. It's reps and sets and stuff like that. But let's just use something tangible that our listeners can understand like time. Let's say I train and my training sessions last an hour.
Right.
Well, I want to increase my volume. So I'm going to do more sets, more exercises over the course of that time. So I'm going to add in 2 exercises, which are going to take me 15 minutes each once I count warm-up sets. So now I'm going an hour and a half. Okay, that may yield some benefits, but again, ultimately you're going to find yourself plateauing because frequency cannot continue to progress, volume cannot continue to progress because you can only work out for so many hours in a day, right? And then again, it goes back to recovery. You're going to get to a point where you cannot recover, it's not sustainable, and then you're going to have to look somewhere else. Progressive overload through actual load and intensity, heavier weight, is the only way that you're going to be able to continue to show progress in the gym if that's your primary focal point, in my opinion, right?
Yes. I mean, I think that's what we're all focused for. I mean, not all. I guess I said that wrong. But that's the focus, is to focus to get bigger, better, faster, stronger, better.
So I'll add that there are certain rep ranges as far as muscle gain and strength gain. Knowing Zane, who asked this question, I can give a little bit of a personal twist on it for him specifically. Football player, student athlete. I would focus on heavier weights, lower reps, and my lower reps could be, doubles and triples all the way up to 12. Now, I know that 12 doesn't seem like lower reps, but that'll give you some hypertrophy benefits. So you will gain some muscle in the 12 to 10, 12, 8 rep range. But also being a football-specific strength-based athlete, 3 to 6 reps, very explosive, slow eccentric, fast eccentric, heavier load is going to be the number 1 progression point. And I think that whatever you do, and gosh, Justin, if we had $1 for every time we said this, track what you do.
Yeah, it's key.
Because you can't, I can't do it, and I've been doing this a long time. I can't even remember sometimes what I had for breakfast, and I eat the same breakfast every day. So it's like, how am I supposed to remember what I did last week on this exercise? Or, I have to write things down. Okay, on my first set of incline barbell press, or my top set, I did this for 8. So this week I got to get 5 more pounds for 8. Or I did this for 7. So this week I'm going to try to get it for 8 reps. Write things down. That is so critically important for not only for athletes, but for general population. Because if you're doing things, just mundanely, and you get sucked into the monotony of going to the gym and doing the same exercises with the same weight, you're never going to progress.
Right.
So in short, I guess that if I had to answer that question, from my opinion, I would say heavier weight, lower reps, but take into consideration everything Justin and I just said, because that all plays a part too.
Yeah, it is. It's ask questions too. Like, if you get to a point where you're hung up and you hit a plateau, you hit a plateau in your diet. A lot of times you throw some food at your diet for a day or two, and you get right back on the bandwagon.
Yep.
Same thing with working out. Sometimes you get a plateau with progress, and you need to change it up drastically. Do some yoga, go for a run, take a day off.
Yep.
And then get back after it, and you'll see a spike in progress. So don't get discouraged. You know what I mean? Like that's a big one too. I think is don't get discouraged when you're not seeing the incremental changes, because we're not going to see our own incremental changes. That's why we write it down.
And I like your answer too a lot, almost better than mine, because my answer is based on, I would say, logic and common sense, because you can't train more frequently past a certain point. You can't do more for your workouts past a certain point. But I really like yours, and I'll make the connection here. I was listening to a video by Dave Tate, who is the owner of Elite FTS, which is both a gym and a powerlifting company. They focus predominantly in the powerlifting industry, but they're strength and conditioning centric, I guess would be a word for it. So shout out to Dave Tate and Elite FTS. I was listening to this video where he was talking about the number one thing missing from lifters programs nowadays, or what young athletes or strength athletes or powerlifters are missing today that they weren't missing back in his day. And he said that, and he gave a very long answer to this, but it wasn't long-winded. It was all necessary information. He talked about how now you have information overload at your fingertips. So you have all this stuff that you can instantly get from the internet. He said that when he was a kid, when he was a young novice athlete learning to train, you would get everything in bodybuilding magazines or powerlifting magazines or whatever. And those only came out once a month.
Right.
So you didn't have a bunch of different stimuli as far as different training methodologies and different diets and different things that different people are doing. There was no social media. All you had was your magazine. So when you got a magazine, the magazine talked about HIT, like high intensity training. Okay.
Right.
So that's heavy weight, very low volume, relatively high frequency sometimes. So if that's what he read, he said, okay, I'm going to try this. And he said that his words were, I was forced to do a deep dive into it because that was all I knew. Well, then a couple months later on another issue, they said, ooh, high volume. So he's like, oh, maybe I should try high volume now. So he did that for several months. So they were forced to do things for long periods of time before they heard about anything else.
Right.
You get on social media and you go to 5 fitness experts that are, number one, know what they're talking about. Number 2, have a very, very good track history with their clients. And number 3, are extremely popular. Those 5 fitness experts will all give you 5 training methods that are completely different from one another. And so now I think in my head as a young lifter, well, what do? This person says I do, higher frequency, lower volume. This person says that I do high volume, low frequency, moderate intensity. Like this person says, German volume training. This person, and there's so many things thrown at you that it's hard to decipher what you should and shouldn't be doing. So the best recommendation, and Dave says this, is that you need to learn to auto-regulate your own training at some point. He also talked about coaches. It's very easy for me to ask a coach, what should I be doing? If you want to be good at this, you have to understand your body. And this isn't just for Zane. This is for everybody. When you get into training, you need to understand what your body needs and how your body best responds. I know that there are certain things that I do for my body as far as reps or sets or total volume or intensity in certain movements or certain exercises in general that I know have shown over time to make me progress in my physique very well and other things that don't. Now that may be complete opposite of what you like
Right.
or what works for you, but I know that because I've done it for so long. So you have to get to the point where, and that's why I like your answer better, try higher volume, and Zane didn't really specifically talk about volume or frequency. He was just talking about higher weight, less reps, or lower weight, higher reps.
Right.
Try them both, but make sure when you do them for an extended period of time. People get caught up where they do something for 3 weeks and say, "Oh, I wasn't making progress."
Right. Yeah. No. You should hate the new program.
Yeah.
For at least a week as you're getting used to a new program. It should not be fun. It shouldn't be. Because you're getting used to the rep range, the different rep counts, all the different variables to a different programming of your own workout. So until you get comfortable with it, you need to accept that this is going to be uncomfortable. This is a learning process, and I'm going to learn if I like this or not. And then once you've learned, if you do or don't, keep doing it.
Yes.
And then pick something else.
Yep. And I'll always go back to different training splits that I didn't think worked for me just to make sure that there weren't other external variables. Maybe I was in a high stress level at that period of time in my life. Maybe my nutrition was not optimal for my body. Maybe there were other things that accounted for this quote unquote program, this training cycle not working for me. I'll revisit it just to make sure, I really didn't get progress on here. So, to say I actually wouldn't, it's kind of like politically speaking, some people call themselves Republicans, some Democrats, some Libertarians. For me, I find myself different categories based on different issues, right? So that's how my training is. To say, Charlie, what's your training look like? Is it, I could say, well, as an overreaching statement, I could say it's lower volume, higher intensity right now, but I have intermittent periods of volume training during certain mesocycles, and I do it, and I don't overcomplicate things, but I also know how my body works and how I should progress through training. So bottom line is experiment. But for an athlete like him who's in football, I would gear more towards heavier weight, lower reps.
Yeah, if you're a football player, from my experience as a football player, explosion. Be explosive. So heavier weight, low reps makes you more explosive.
It doesn't get much simpler than that. Yeah. You're right. And that's where the exercise, no pun intended, of common sense comes in.
Right.
What am I trying to get better at, and how can I, at least to some degree, mimic that in the weight room? All right. Next question we have is from Bubba. And Bubba says, causes of systematic inflammation and how it affects the wellness of someone. All right. So you and I both have our own problems with inflammation, I guess, so to speak. Yeah. Unfortunately, and or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. So I saw this question earlier, and I thought, okay, that's an interesting question. We can definitely answer that. The one thing that I wanted to make note of, though, this was what popped in my head initially, is that people need to understand also that inflammation is necessary and good,
right,
in doses. Like, when you think of inflammation, Justin, like what first comes to your mind?
Swelling and pain in my ankles.
There you go. And I knew you were going to say something orthopedically related, which does, acute inflammation manifest itself in pain? Yes. In swelling? Yes. In redness? Yes. Aching? Yes. Heat? Yes. Right. That's what inflammation typically manifests itself as. But inflammation is an immune response at the cellular level. So if you get a cut, you need inflammation, right, because that's how the wound heals. I heard one time, and I forget who I heard this from, but one time I heard that inflammation is comparable to having mini surgeries wherever the inflammation is. So when you have surgery, you're going to have a hyper-inflammatory response at the place of that surgery, right? You're going to get a ton of pain, a ton of blood flow, a ton of swelling because it's your body's natural reaction. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think of that is, that's kind of analogous to training. Mm-hmm. So when you train, you need inflammation for your body to repair and to recover and to hopefully and ideally build back stronger.
Right.
So inflammation is actually a good thing when you talk about training. Acute inflammation to a degree. That's why. Now this is really splitting hairs here, and I think that you and I talked about it before with your diet, not on air, but I think that we were working earlier last year, we talked about it. Trying, and this is very, very specific, and most people probably won't notice a whole lot of difference from this. This is like the 0.1%, I think, like deal breaker or difference maker. Trying to keep anti-inflammatory foods, so fruits and vegetables, away from the workout window.
Right.
So I know people that have a set time, and I don't know what the literature says about that time window. I know some people don't eat vegetables or fruits for 2 hours before the workout or 2 hours after the workout because they want to have that that inflammatory response to help tissue repair and tissue growth post-workout. And they don't want to blunt that at all. Now, to what degree does having like some broccoli pre-workout blunt your inflammatory response? I don't know. I can't quantify that. I'm really not sure.
Right.
Probably not. It's probably a negligible difference. And like I said, that's for like the 0.01 elite percent of the population that's like standing on stage competing that would make a difference. But again, we strive for optimal. Right.
Absolutely.
So that is acute inflammation. That's one of the reasons too. Like, I'm sure that you've heard this for bodybuilders. I know this because being a bodybuilder, generally it's recommended to stay away from NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen or whatever. Not only is it bad for your liver, of course, and some bodybuilders do things that hurt their liver to begin with, but also because it's anti-inflammatory, and some inflammation around the workout is a good thing, especially on the cellular level, immune response, all that stuff.
I mean, that's what working out that's what your goal is.
Yeah.
To make that response from your muscles. You tear them down so they can repair and build back bigger. And
I think that there's some, like, because our listener demographic is like all over the board.
Right.
Like we have people that are very far advanced in the training and nutrition and knowledge, and we have people that are, don't really even know what to do at the gym when they get there.
Right.
So we try to give both ends of the spectrum here, but I think that raises a good point because a lot of people don't know that.
Right.
I don't think about training. They think, oh, I'm working out, I have a pump, so my arms are getting bigger. Where in essence, that's just fatigue toxins and blood flow and water and glycogen. You're actually not making your arms bigger. In fact, you're technically making them smaller.
Right.
You're having micro tears in your tissues, which then get repaired and grow back stronger. Hence, why in our first question or second question, we talked about progressive overload.
Right.
You have to continue to give your body a more advanced stimulus because once it gets used to the stimulus, it's not going to break down and repair stronger because it's going to be able to handle that stimulus.
Right.
So systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation is when inflammation becomes less acute and more chronic. So when it's ongoing. There could be a lot of causes and there could be a lot of side effects or effects of this, which obviously are bad. This is when inflammation goes bad. And this is the normal connotation or association that people make with inflammation when they hear like, oh, inflammation's bad, inflammation bad. This is what they're talking about. So number one is, how does it happen? And I'll give you a little anecdote on how it happened for me personally. The first time that I ever experienced prolonged and chronic inflammation and central nervous system downregulation, a whole other slew of issues, was when I was in college. And it was not because of partying or staying up late. It was actually, ironically, it was the contrary. I was living a very healthy lifestyle and going to the gym all the time and all that. But for some reason, I just loved training deadlifts. That was like the one exercise that I felt really confident in. I was always pretty good at. I deadlifted well over 600 pounds, under 200 pounds body weight. I think my best pull ever, I was 181 and I pulled 635, I believe, raw maybe I had a belt on. I can't even remember. So it might have even been without a belt, but regardless, again, I mean, that's not mind blowing or anything, but it was pretty impressive for my body size and stuff. So I love deadlifting. So I would do it all the time, but it wasn't like I didn't have like a dynamic day and a max effort day, like a max effort where I'd do heavy and then the dynamic where I would do reps. Like I went to the gym, every day, number one. and I was deadlifting, maxing out deadlifting probably 3 days a week. No joke. And it was just because I liked it. And I would always find a way to program it in. Like, oh, today's back day. Well, I can do deadlifts on back day, right? Naturally. Oh, 2 days later, oh, it's leg day. Well, you get a lot of leg drive and hamstring and glute work during deadlifts, so I'm going to do deadlifts today. And I didn't even change variation. Like, it's not like I did like sumo one day, and then maybe some rack pulls, and then some conventional or some deficit pulls from the floor. Like, it was just conventional deadlift from the floor for max singles multiple times a week. Bang, 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 bang. And like the progression was even stupid. I would just work up with heavy singles as heavy as I could. So like 135, do it for one. 225, do it for one. 275, do it for one. 315, do it for one. 365, do it for one. 405, do it for one. 455, do it for one. And I would just take, minute, 2-minute breaks while my training partners went, throw on a quarter or throw on another 45 and pull. And we would keep doing that until I couldn't go anymore, and then I was done.
I know another guy like that.
Oh, yeah. and it's because it's fun, right?
Yeah.
I mean, heck, you deadlifted back-to-back days the other day.
Yeah.
And
2 in a row.
What happened is over time, I noticed my body started to like shut down on me. And it was like I felt sick all the time. Inflammation, an inflammatory immune response or a hyperimmune response. I felt sick all the time. I felt tired all the time. My body was not tissue sore, but joint sore, and just systemically sore. It's the only way I can describe it, all over the place. And my nervous system was just completely shot. Sleep quality was terrible. And I did some research because, again, like I'm young. Yeah, I'm 19 years old at the time. And I think that I was like overloading my nervous system and getting to the point where, like, I was systemically inflamed.
Right.
And had like, I'm sure if you did blood work, my inflammatory markers were through the roof, but I didn't know enough about blood work at the time to get it done or to even think about pursuing it.
Right.
So it's not like I did that. And the only thing I did once I seek guidance of some people who knew a lot more than I did, I just stopped max deadlifting multiple times a week and changed nothing about my diet, nothing else about my training. And I don't want to say I didn't change my sleep, but my sleep got better on its own.
Right.
And my pain went away and I wasn't sick all the time. And it just, my immune response was better. Everything was just so much more regulated once I stopped that systemic inflammation. It was crazy. And so like, I know that I've heard, Austin, my coach, say before that with inflammation, if you get it chronically, it can affect every organ and every bodily function, circulatory system, respiratory system, all of your organs, like your stomach, your spleen, your gallbladder, your liver, your kidneys, everything gets affected by inflammation. And then, we talk about like, that's a good talking point, something that you and I have talked about all the time and had to troubleshoot through, especially before you were, training wheels off, doing it on your own, is what foods are pro-inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory.
Because I had no idea at all.
And sometimes, everybody knows, or they think they know what anti-inflammatory foods are, right? Let's just group it in fruits and vegetables, make it simple. But pro-inflammatory foods, you'll hear dairy thrown around a lot. Like that's kind of like that pseudo-healthy food. Some people say, is it healthy? Is it not?
Right.
Can your body tolerate it? Like, if so, yes. If not, no. Right. Because you might be getting like an inflammatory response from the foods you're eating, where you feel bloated or you feel excessive gas or you feel a ton of dairy could make you very mucousy, or other foods can make you mucousy. That's an immune response and an inflammatory response in a sense.
That's where meal timing comes into play with this too. Big time. Like there's a lot of areas that can be twisted and turned.
Yeah.
To make to elicit a certain response from your body during training.
And I think that the one thing that it goes back to again is what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Like for me, I know that I can't eat a ton of oatmeal as a carbohydrate source. There have been periods of time where I've done either MRE shakes by Redcon One, which is the company that I'm affiliated with. And when I was doing high intake of MRE as a meal replacement shake to help, add extra calories to my nutrition, I was the biggest and strongest I'd ever been, but there was a lot of oatmeal, refined oatmeal in there. So when I was having all that oatmeal powder, my God, was my gas horrible. And
Yeah.
every single person within a 100-mile radius
Knew it.
could tell for sure.
Yep.
And I know that, and I've done like elimination diets where I've removed oatmeal completely, put oatmeal back in, and sure enough, it starts right again.
Right.
So I can tolerate a little bit of oatmeal. It's weird though, because I don't get any other signs of gastrointestinal distress.
Just the gas.
Yeah, just the gas. Like I don't have bloating, I don't have cramps, I don't have, bowel movements are fine. It's just my gas gets so bad. So yeah, I mean, to answer the question, systemic inflammation can really affect pretty much every part of your well-being.
Right,
It can
it
affect
definitely.
your sleep. It's foremost affects your immune response, which kind of disrupts and dysregulates every single thing else. I think it's important for people, again, to go back to auto-regulating these things and see why, if I'm feeling sick and I'm feeling crappy and it's prolonged, and I suspect that it is, an inflammation issue, what can I do to figure out if it is or not? Well, number one, look at your lifestyle. Are you burning the candle at both ends? Like, I know people that wake up, not going to mention any names here, but people that wake up very early and, while training may be good and diet may be good, some people have to live off Red Bulls and energy drinks and don't sleep because they're trying to work so hard, right? And it is what it is, but that could lend itself to,
Injury.
Yeah, of course, or any other things. And then there's obviously blood markers, which if there's anybody that wants to know more about like inflammatory markers in the blood, like mine, I get mine tested pretty regularly to see reactive protein. You can contact me because I think that's kind of like a higher up discussion, which may go over a lot of people's heads, not in the sense that they're unable to understand it, because I'm not insulting the listeners. I just don't think they care about the specifics of blood work in that regard. So yeah, I think that it's kind of funny how the 3 questions that we've answered so far, and we're already at our prescribed time limit. I think it's funny how all of them went back to find out what works for you. Like, I did yoga and this type of yoga because I found out that it worked for me. And then we had the question about what types of weights should I be lifting? And we said, well, we give this recommendation, but find out what works for you. Same thing with inflammation. This wasn't even like an opinion question. It was just asking how inflammation can affect someone. And it's like, we still go back to, well, if you think that you have an inflammation issue, find out how you personally can fix it or what you're doing that's causing it.
I think it's important. It's so important because these answers weren't cop-out answers because they can be looked at like that.
No. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
they can be looked at as, oh, these guys just want you to do all the work. They don't want to tell you. Well, no, I don't want to tell anybody because I'm nobody to tell.
Yep.
I want to give my honest answer, and you can just maybe to save somebody the misery of focusing on the wrong thing, because I focused on the wrong thing for a whole year before I started to really focus on the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Or 28 whole years.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, 28 years. Yeah.
It's like, just that's my only reason for any answers that I give, because I don't, when Charlie, when you first told me we should do question and answer, I was like, what answers can I honestly give? Because I don't feel like I have any real answers.
Well, I think that it's important to balance, and maybe this is where some synergy between you and I comes in, is, I've been involved in fitness a lot longer than you have.
Right.
Like, and I think that your learning curve has been incredibly short with the way that you've, studied and researched and studied yourself more than anything.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm a walking experiment to tell you what works and what doesn't work for me. But I think that anytime you have, you're seeking answers, I think it's important to see both sides. Like, hey, this is what the literature says. This is what the science says. Here's all the science stuff or mumbo jumbo behind it. But here's also someone who may not be as well versed in stating specific literature or like specific sources on where this information comes from. But hey, I tried this and this is what happened.
Right.
Because I feel like that's a lot more relatable than someone who comes on a podcast and just states all these scientific studies.
This is what you need to do.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not into that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people say the phrase "take it with a grain of salt" is almost derogatory, but take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Listen to what or if you choose to listen to what I say or have to say or what Charlie has to say, do that. But ultimately, take everything you read, everything you listen, everything you see on the interwebs, that we have right at our fingertips,
Mhm.
and then form your best educated opinion. And then if it's still not working, ask again. Ask another question. Try to figure out another angle at the problem.
And I'm one of those people too where I'm lucky enough to where I've had more of a sample size to be able to pull from anecdotally. Like for you, you are your own case study, right?
Right.
And me, I am my own case study. So I can say what works for me. Justin can say what works for him. But I'm privileged enough, I'm privileged enough to have worked with dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of athletes and like hundreds of athletes in sports that I've coached, different training facilities that I've worked at, like Alliance Athletics in Monroeville in PA with Adam Blumen, who will be a guest on our show before too long. I've had the opportunity to work with some very, very high-end, high-caliber athletes out there. And then even in the local gyms around here that I've worked at. So I have all those sample sizes as well. So like I can say, well, this worked for me. This is what worked for Justin. But I've also seen in X amount of athletes that the trend seems to point towards this being the right way or this being the optimal way. Because I think with anything, you have to blend science and you have to blend real life.
Right.
Because sometimes people get too caught up in the science, and science is, this is a very controversial statement, but science is fallible. Science,
it does make,
is not always foolproof because of the way studies are conducted. For example, if you're doing hypertrophy studies to see how something affects muscle gain and you're doing it on mice, genetically similar but not genetically the same. So there's going to be differences in human trials versus clinical trials on mice. So I think that sometimes it's more important to do the anecdotal stuff, like what worked for a person versus what a guy in a white lab coat says.
Right. Absolutely.
And then the other cop-out answer that I find myself giving all the time is it depends.
It does.
And I hate saying that to people because I want to give people definitive answers because I like solving problems, and I feel humbled enough when people come to me to ask me questions when they're like, hey, I have a question about this. And I'm like, well, man, I don't really know much, but like I'll try to help you because I still don't feel like I know anything. And
me too.
When I get these questions, I want to be able to help the person. And so when I try to help someone, I try to give them an answer, but I feel like sometimes the only answer I give is, well, it depends.
Right.
Because there's so many external factors that go into everything fitness related that it's almost impossible to give them something definitive and concrete.
When people ask me questions, like today, actually, I had one of your soon-to-be new athletes ask me, how do you stretch your quads and your hamstrings and glutes? And I was like, oof, that's a big answer. That was a loaded question.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, man. And I was like, I can show you. You have 5 minutes? And I just got down on the floor and said, all right, well, I started stretching and showing him. And he was like, I don't know what you mean. I'm like, well, sit on your butt.
Yeah.
And let's go through the motion, and I'll show you what in how it works for me. And then when you feel that response, so that's how I do it. Like whenever people ask me questions, I just show them.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's work out. Like you have a specific plan today, because I find a lot of times the those people that are asking the questions, like a very broad question, they don't really have a plan they're following.
Yeah.
So they come in, they move this, they do that, they do some bench, they do some curls, and they go home.
A lot of people seem to do best with those types of people seem to do best with visual representation. They're visual learners. They learn by seeing, and then kinesthetically they learn by doing.
Right.
And I actually had one of my newer clients, Brooklyn. She's a senior soccer player and basketball player. Soccer is her main sport. We were going through some drills, some single leg drills during our movement portion of training. And she was like, can you show me? Because I was explaining it. And I said, you know what? Like, absolutely I can. And she said, yeah, I just learn better when I see things. And I realized that was kind of a point of reflection for me. Like, hey, maybe because some of my athletes I've worked with for 6 or 7 years. Like literally I've trained them since, I've been at this school or been in this area. So like I can give verbiage and cues and they know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, hey, do this, 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 and this drill. They're like, okay, I'm on it, coach. And they'll go do it. Whereas when I work with someone new, I explain a drill to them very quickly because I want to push tempo and make sure we get a lot in. They'll say, I don't know what you mean by that. And I'm like, oh, okay, I have to show you. So it was kind of like a point where I needed to start reflecting and say, hey, I need to do a better job of showing my athletes this. And not only because they can monitor like the specific drill, but then they can monitor my intensity and they can monitor my focus. And so sometimes when I train clients, I will do their warm up with them, which doesn't seem like a lot, but like the warm ups that I do, the progression is pretty extensive because it's not just priming them for the movement portion and strength portion of the training. It's also priming them to get better mobility, better flexibility, get more kinesthetic awareness and more in tune with their body. So I'll go through this with them. So like, hey, this is how you do it. You should be out of breath when you're done with this warm up. You should be,
sweating.
Sweating. You should be pushing the ranges of your mobility through these movements. So yeah, I think that showing people is very, very beneficial for sure.
That's where I got it from, actually. I stole it from you because whenever you wrote my first program that you wrote for me, I was like, what does 90-90 hip mobility mean? I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, come back here, I'll show you your whole warm-up. And it was like, oh, I did all of those wrong.
Isn't it very ironic how that you said that how important it is to show people? And you originally got it from me, and yet now I'm the one that says I need to do a better job nowadays of showing people stuff because I tend to get away from that sometimes just because of comfortability. Like when you're working with athletes for so long, there's kind of an assumed, like for example, I teach 5th grade.
Yeah,
everybody knows that. I assume that when you come to me that you should be able to add single-digit numbers. You should be able to subtract single-digit numbers. There's like prerequisites of being in 5th grade that you should be able to do, and I expect you to do that. And sometimes I expect a little bit too much of athletes, not necessarily my expectations of where they're going, but my expectations on some of the verbiage. And I have to forget, like, these athletes don't study exercise science. They don't even care about the training. They just see it as a means to an end. Like, hey, you are going to help me get better at football, so I'm going to listen to you. I don't care why we're doing this. I trust you enough, but tell me what to do.
Yep.
Now, I always try to explain why we're doing for the few that care. And then plus, you want to develop and engender lifelong learners. So I want to give people enough training knowledge that when they're done training with me, they can do this on their own. And not only can they do it on their own, but they can also share it with other people.
Right.
So it gets passed down because I'll see certain things at the gym that I do that someone comes up and say, hey, why do you do that? What is the purpose of this exercise? Or that looks pretty cool. Can you explain to me? And I'll explain to them. And then they'll go show someone. And then that person will show someone. And I think that's really cool because like imitation is the highest form of flattery? Is that what they say? So like, I think that's really neat when you can pass information and give information to someone and then they give it to someone else.
The trickle down effect in our area at the local gyms from the stuff that you've taught in the last 6 years around here to people is incredible.
Well, thank you. But I think that's really, when you think about it, it's all trickle down.
Yeah.
Like social media, magazines, internet, you're getting it from somewhere.
Right.
It just helps when you're getting it from someone that lives next to you or goes to the same gym and trains as you or whatever. So yeah, man, definitely some great questions this week.
Shout out to Bubba coming in with another good question.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. I can't remember. Oh, it was ketogenic diets.
Yes.
He was talking about some of the implementations of a ketogenic diet. Well, I think it was blood sugar specific because he talked about blood sugar regulation on the ketogenic diet, which was a very high end question. So thanks for that.
Yeah, man.
But it's funny because I think when we do these question and answers, like I feel like last time specifically, we got so many questions that we didn't answer, and we said we needed to make a running log, and then unfortunately, I'll take the blame for that. I never did, forgot and lost where the questions were, and now we're left with all new questions, which is fine, but like I'd love to be able to answer everybody's questions, but we only did 3 questions today, and we took an hour to do so.
Right.
Now, some of it was you and I just,
chatterboxing.
Yeah, back and forth like usual, but hopefully we gave some thorough answers to some of your questions. Again, I'll say this for both Justin and I because I know that he has the same feelings. If you guys ever ask questions or want questions answered that you think one of us may be able to help with, just message us. I mean, we do this all the time, so it's not like it has to be on air. I like doing things on air because there may be people with the same questions that you have that we help people answer. But again, we're not experts. We're not sports and exercise science doctors. We're not orthopedic doctors. We're actually furthest thing from any type of doctor.
Yep.
Take everything, like Justin said, for a grain of salt. We're just trying to give you our experience, what we've read and what we've learned from other people, and use the information that we give and use it or don't use it and try to learn from it.
That's it. I mean, I couldn't say it any better.
Any closing words before we end tonight's podcast and get her posted up?
Just keep hammering, keep after it, and keep things interesting. don't let yourself get complacent.
Yep.
Because complacency kills.
Get uncomfortable, baby.
Yes.
All right, so with that, we have come to the end of another episode. This is episode 29, correct,
Yes,
sir?
29.
Episode 29. So we appreciate all the listeners, all the people that ask questions. I got to interrupt. I got to interrupt myself before we close out for two things. Number one, I got to give a plug to our sponsor, Beast Mode Baking, and Shannon Knorr. We will tag them in the show notes, so make sure you give Shannon Knorr a follow. She's a professional athlete, a nurse, and a small business owner who owns Beast Mode Baking for the greatest tasty goods on the planet.
Go give Shannon some love. She missed her what would have been her first pro debut bodybuilding show today.
Coronavirus.
Because of the coronavirus.
And we can say coronavirus on here because we can't get demonetized because we don't make any money anyway.
Right.
We can say coronavirus. So shout out to Shannon. And lastly, I wanted to say, please, people, you guys are the ones that make this podcast happen. It's kind of like I think we used the reference last week about the church is not the building, it's the people.
Yep.
So the podcast is not the studio, or in this case, the car. Yep. It's the people. Yep. So you guys are the ones that make this happen. Please share these episodes. Please like these episodes. Download these episodes. If there's someone that you think would benefit from listening to these episodes, tag them in our stuff. We really appreciate everybody's following. We're just two normal guys trying to make everybody's lives better, including our own, and let you into our journey. So now with that, we have come to the end of an episode. So this is episode 29 for Charlie and Justin. We are out.